because you can change your life with the power of your thoughts. And of course, it's not just thinking, it's actions too. And
Right.
I wanted to point out, when I first met you, your life was completely different. You have completely changed your whole reality and what you experience on a daily basis through your thoughts and changing the way you were thinking about things and your perspective on things and the way you felt about things. So tell me, what is that like for you now? Like it just must feel like such a different world.
It feels a different world. It feels like you are more empty, like you're more free inside of you. Because when you are in a relationship or in a job that you don't like, or you're going through life that something very like consuming your time in your life, is so heavy, and also it reflects in the way you speak and the way you look, and also you feel like you already age. And going back to myself to see what I was going through and compare right now is like the day and night. It's like, wow, I never thought I can get to this point to be more empty, more like not empty, like more
Peace.
without baggage, clean, and thinking so positive, and going into some different projects, and living the present. And that is the main thing for me, that I'm living day by day. Because I noticed that when you think a lot in the future, what it is you doing is anxiety, number one, and number two, you shorten your time here. And I don't want that. I want to enjoy every single moment. So that's why I practice the single present. Of course, I'm working like everybody, working in my projects now. Where's gonna those projects, or where my life is gonna live, I don't know. But right now in this present, I'm with you. I'm super happy to live this moment, and that's the key.
To be in the present moment. I love that. That's amazing
Yeah,
advice. My
yeah,
reality has changed too. I mean, we've talked over the years about from my divorce and not, being ready to date to being ready to date to actually
yeah.
dating. And well, I have a boyfriend.
I know. I'm so happy for you. I'm so
Yeah.
happy for you.
Yeah.
And you
We'll see where it
change.
goes.
You're more. You're glowing. You look like you are in love.
Oh, uh oh. Hold on. We're not I'm not sure I'm ready for that yet, but it's going good. So in the present moment, it's going very good. So if he's watching, it's going very good. Anyway, so today, speaking of relationships, today we have a whole topic about relationships and how they can go bad. And I feel like this topic is important because it's like a silent epidemic. No one's talking really a lot
Yes.
about domestic violence, like in the
Yes.
main media or anything like that. And no one definitely is talking about verbal abuse as part of that in the main media and in the news and what you're seeing around. So I think you can find it on podcasts like this one and things of that nature. But really, I think it's a topic worth discussing. And I think it's a silent epidemic, really. Most
Yes.
people are in some type or have experienced an abusive, verbally abusive relationship. And sometimes they don't even know that they're the ones doing the verbal abuse. So I think this is important to discuss.
But do you know what do you think you know, or will you know what is the cause of this?
Well, I think it's a lot of different factors. Number one, I think it's feeling powerless within one's own self and the way that someone sort of displays that or puts that out. Like feeling powerless for one reason or another. You could be feeling powerless at work, so you come home and you take it out on your spouse or your children. You could have felt powerless as a child, so now as an adult, you you deal with it that way.
I would say this is more family patterns, because
Mhm,
what you give is what you see, what you learn grow in being a child.
mhm,
And sometimes when you are in a toxic relationship, in a toxic relationship, not with a toxic person, because
Mhm.
we are not toxic. It's the relationship that became toxic.
Mhm.
So you cannot blame the other person. And also you can also blame yourself, because there's two different lives that come together. And unfortunately, some families, they think it's okay to talk the way they talk, or treat the women or the men the way they treat them, but because that's what exactly they saw growing up.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. I think definitely environmental factors play a role, and role modeling definitely play a
Yes.
role in the likelihood of people who will do verbal abuse and people who will receive verbal abuse and accept it as normal behavior.
Right.
Right. So I think this is a really important topic today we're going to dive into. And it's inspired by a friend of mine going through a situation um, where it's happening. And I just really feel like it's important because a lot of people don't discuss this or know that they're experiencing it or have experienced it or are doing it and understand the underlying reasons why. So our girl is back. Our dear friend Angeline, she's back. She is the host of Let's Break the Silence. She is an activist. She is a survivor, and she is out here championing abuse in all of its forms for people, for the survivors of it. Like, she's championing these survivors of domestic violence, whether it's physical, emotional, or verbal. And so I think the last time she was here, we were talking about the Johnny Depp trial, and everyone seemed to love that. If you haven't seen that episode, check out our YouTube channel or our Facebook page. Go back through and check out that episode because everyone seems to love it. It's probably one of the most watched and most listened to in the podcast form as well. So Angeline is back. Hi, Tendai. Oh, look who's here. Our
Ooh.
original number one fan.
Wow. Wow. Hi, Tendai. I still thinking to go to Texas, and you gonna pick us in the limo
We have a party down there by
limo
Dallas.
party.
So great to see you back here, sweetie. We love when you tune in. So let's bring in Angeline.
Hey.
Hi. So
Hi, how are you?
we're
So great
great.
to be
How are
back.
you?
I'm doing good, doing good. It's so great to be back.
I'm so
Yes, I'm
glad to
so
have
happy
you
to
here.
see you.
Yeah, happy to see both of you. You both look great and glowing. Gloria, you're glowing.
Thank you, my
Yeah.
Yeah.
dear.
And
Yep.
Key,
She
I'm
is
so happy
going.
for you. Congratulations.
Thank you. So
Yeah,
far, so good, as they
so far
say.
so good, right?
So, what people don't really know is last year, I think it was, it might have been the year before, we all started reading a book together. And it was called The Verbally Abusive Relationship by a woman called Patricia Evans. And we went on to, that's right, that's the one. And we went on to Instagram. And if you go to our Hot Topics Live
Mhm.
Instagram page at Hot Topics, the podcast, you can go back and see those lives where we were discussing chapters from this book. But I wanted to sort of do the whole thing in one short, one little podcast, because I think it's really important to bring up some of the information that we learned there. And a lot of it has to do with, how this happens. Like, what I remember most about reading that is that a person who perpetrates verbal abuse and the person who receives verbal abuse a lot of times live in two different realities.
Mm.
And one person's reality is more of, if we get into an argument, for example, I have to win this fight.
Right.
And the other person's reality could be, if we get into an argument, I want to explain things and help figure things out together and resolve the conflict in a kind way, while the other person is thinking, I'm going to say anything, I'm going to, call names, I'm going to do whatever it takes to win this fight. What do you think about that, Angeline?
Yeah, and unfortunately that's so common. That is so common today. But, like regarding the the fights, I mean, that break out, I know for myself, speaking from my experience, I don't recall that I ever started a fight. My ex started the fight when I was married. He would always start the fight. And it's the way that we, communicate to each other. So verbal abuse is actually the definition of verbal abuse is when someone is manipulative. Um, they prevent you from, having other friendships with people. Everything is their way. It's power and control. They make insulting remarks, demeaning remarks, condescending remarks. And I didn't realize that this was happening to me at the time. But later on, I did. And so learning to recognize when those insulting remarks happen. And in the past, in my marriage, I used to fight back, give into it. And it would escalate and get worse, because I was feeding into it. So I learned, through counseling, therapy, and surrounding myself with, coaches. I had, a coach who was mentoring me not to respond. See, for myself, I didn't respond. I just walked away. And, typical him, he would, try to fire back and say something else. But why this happens, I think it's because they have low self-esteem, lack of self-confidence, something in their childhood happened that, maybe triggered something. So hopefully that makes sense. Just recognizing it, learning when to recognize it, because a lot of women I know feel ashamed to bring it out. And like you were talking about, they're afraid to talk about, verbal abuse, right? I mean, right now, there are women coming to me and they're sharing their stories. And that takes a lot of courage. That takes a lot of courage for them to come forward and, share their stories. But I see more of it happening now, whereas in the past, like now, I mean, I feel that the issue is still shoved under the carpet. I mean, this month was Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Mm-hmm. So what are we doing?
Right.
Yeah, what are we doing? It's still, I feel, shoved under the carpet, but, we can work on bringing those real life situations, like here on your podcast, on my podcast. That's why I created the podcast, Let's Break the Silence, because we need to break the silence on verbal abuse. So, I've read the book, I've listened to the audio. It's how we respond to the abuser. It's how we respond. So if we respond by just firing back and say, you did this, or whatever it is, when you use the word you, and I'm guilty, I was guilty of this, it just makes the situation worse.
I mean, I agree with you. I in my marriage, my situation was where my partner would get angry and say things that, were as mean as possible, right? Just in the heat of the moment, things that they would regret saying afterward, but because they were so angry in the moment, they would say things. And for many years, I would just say, you shouldn't say that to me because you will regret it later. Arguments are not about who wins. Arguments are about resolving the conflict so that we grow closer, right? Mm-hmm. And this was my perspective, meaning we lived in two different realities. The arguments were after a while started to make me feel a little bit crazy, because he would be saying things to me and in a way that made me feel demeaned and made me feel disrespected. And I'm a fighter. So after a while of trying to make sense to him, I started to respond like you and fight back. Right. And then it would escalate and escalate and escalate. And it actually, during our divorce, it got to the point where I was concerned that it would become physically violent. Right. So it just was a moment where we just had to get away from each other, and we had to spend a lot of time apart in order to be able, now we're friends. But in order for that to happen, all of this stuff had to end. And I had to realize that we are in two different realities. My reality is we work together to communicate to resolve a conflict, and his reality is I need to win this argument. And if there's no way to bridge the two, then maybe we're not a match.